beginning of the universe, there were only the Aether and the Keepers. Among them were two beings who would later be known by many names, one primarily known as Dr. Monty, and the other as the Shadowman. In time, the Keepers crafted the Summoning Key, a device that allows them to manipulate the Aether, holding power over reality itself. They used it to create Agartha. Keepers later mastered the ability to travel between dimensions using the key. At some point, several Keepers, among which the Shadowman, began experimenting with the Dark Aether, an energy beneath creation. The Dark Aether corrupted and corroded their souls, and the corrupted Keepers became known as the Apothicons. The Apothicons created the Aether Pyramid, a device capable of absolute power. A schism then formed between them and the Keepers, untainted by the Dark Aether. Soon after, a war broke out between the Apothicons and the uncorrupted Keepers. Facing defeat, the Apothicons hid the Aether Pyramid on a moon within one of the newly discovered dimensions. After banishing the Apothicons to the Dark Aether, the remaining Keepers took on the mantle of Guardians. Trapped in the Dark Aether, the Apothicons evolved over eons into twisted creatures that now bared very little resemblance to their Keeper brethren. But they desired, above all else, to return to Agartha. By September 5 CE, the Apothicons, knowing the Earth has a gateway to Agartha, sent meteors containing element 115 to the planet in different dimensions across space and time. They believe humanity will one day use element 115 to wage war among themselves, opening a rift that will allow the Apothicons to escape the Dark Aether. On January 15th of 1292, the Great War between humanity, including the Wolf King, and the Apothicons began across dimensions. During the war, Sir Pablo Marinus was saved from the clutches of a Margwa by four heroes known as Primis. On December 31st, 1299, after more than 7 years of war, Primis, with the Keepers and the rest of humanity, defeated the Apothicons, bringing the Great War to an end, before they seemingly disappeared from history. Primis instructed the Wolf King to begin building the castle that would later be known as Dreisendrach. Several years later, honoring the Wolf King's dying request, his loyal servant Arthur scattered and buried his bones in the grounds of Dreisendrach, accompanied by the king's wolf. Arthur was then teleported by temporal rifts to Resolution 1295 in 2025 Angola. In 1885, a blacksmith named Jebediah Brown was living in a mining town called Purgatory Point in the Old West. The mine contained large amounts of element 115, which started to affect people who went down there. One of the miners turned into a zombie and attacked Jebediah's mother, killing her. Wanting to find answers, Jebediah went down in the mine, where he spent 5 days without realizing it. Later, on April 19th, Jebediah had a vision in his sleep. 2 angels asked him to build a machine, a pack-a-punch machine, which became a success in the town. On June 30th, Jebediah had another vision. The 2 angels asked him to create an Agarthan device. The Agarthan device had 3 components: the blood of an elder god found at the bottom of the ocean, an elemental shard created by forging 4 human souls to a rock of element 115, and a metallic vril vessel. Jeb managed to create the vessel, but had no means of obtaining the blood or the souls. So, after crafting the vril vessel, Jebediah upgraded it with the pack-a-punch. As a result of this, and the fracturing of the Earth after Ultimates helped Maxis launch rockets from the moon in 2025, a temporal rift was created, transporting the entire town, including Jebediah, to an underground cavern in Angola. Afterwards, zombies began to overrun the now buried town, killing its inhabitants, including Jebediah. On June 30th, 1908, a meteor containing element 115 crashed near the Stony Tunguska River in Siberia. Over the next decades, more deposits of element 115 were discovered in Germany, Japan, the United States of America, and on the moon. In 1931, after a large deposit of element 115 was found in Breslau, Dr. Ludwig Maxis formed Group 935 as an international German-led research team, becoming its head scientist. The Doris facility was established at Breslau. Maxis sought to use the newly discovered element to improve the human condition by developing advanced technologies. He invited Dr. Edward Richthofen, who would later be known as Ultimus Richthofen, to join Group 935. Richthofen would agree, secretly acting on behalf of the Illuminati's interests. By 1939, Maxis and Ultimus Richthofen had began work on the first teleportation experiments with a matter transference prototype. The experiments were unsuccessful. The subjects were teleported, but their chemical composition was altered, leaving them catatonic and changed. Ultimus Richthofen also began the development of the Wunderwaffe DG-2. In this same year, Maxis turned to the Reichstag and the Nazi Party for additional funding. They agreed to the request, expressing interest in Group 935's weapons research, teleportation technology, and the reanimated undead subject to help the Axis win the war. Ultimus Richthofen and Dr. Schuster continued working on teleportation and successfully teleported a walnut during Test Trial 151. The result, however, failed to impress Maxis, who revealed to Ultimus Richthofen that Group 935 would soon be funded by Nazi Germany. Ultimus Richthofen worried this would lead to mass defections, but he decided to continue the experiments with Schuster behind Maxis's back. In the early days of 1940, Schuster and Ultimus Richthofen conducted the first human teleportation test. Ultimus Richthofen was so unbelievably confident in its success that he volunteered himself. He was teleported to the moon, where he encountered the Aether pyramid, calling it the MPD, or Moon Pyramid Device. While inspecting the device, Richthofen was electrocuted and began hearing many voices of corruption, including the Shadowman's. He was then teleported to Shangri-La in the Himalayas, where he was worshipped by the natives who built an altar in his name. Ultimus Richthofen also encountered the focusing stone for the first time. Corrupted by the dark ether, Ultimus Richthofen was gradually driven insane by an obsession to reach Agartha. Ultimus Richthofen returned to Doris a few weeks later with a plan to build a station on the moon called Griffin Station. He also renounced his involvement with the Illuminati. Frustrated with Maxis's alignment with Germany, other disgruntled Group 935 scientists joined his cause. Several months later, Maxis contacted the Reichstag High Command, requesting additional funds, stating Doris lacked not only the funding, but a sufficient volume of Element 115 as well. In response to his request, Nazi Germany built 2 new facilities in Berlin for Group 935. They were known as the Kino facility, a repurposed theater, and the Asylum facility at Wittenau Sanatorium. The Imperial Japanese Army handed over the Rising Sun facility to Group 935, which collaborated with Division 9 at this facility's site. Group 935 also established a facility in Siberia near the Tunguska River and a research facility at Der Eisendrache called Eagle's Nest. By 1942, Griffin Station was completed. Ultimus Richthofen appointed Dr. Groff as lead scientist and tasked him and Schuster to discover a way to power the MPD. While at the Rising Sun facility, Maxis developed the ray gun prototype, while H. Porter worked on the second-generation model. In May of 1942, after soldiers returned from Africa, Ultimus Richthofen reported that they found a number of artifacts from an American town. Among the artifacts and documents recovered were pieces of the Pack-a-Punch machine from Jebediah Brown. Ultimus Richthofen gave the schematics to H. Porter to replicate Brown's work. Ultimus Richthofen also discovered plans for the Agarthan device and the Vril device, as well as the Vril vessel. On June 13, 1942, as a result of temporal rifts caused by Ultimus traveling through time to reach the Kino facility in 1963, Dr. Monty reached across time and space and offered little nudges. One nudge is helping Group 935 to develop Element 115 fused elixirs. They created 4 medicinal beverages known colloquially as Juggernog, Quick Revive, Speed Cola, and Double Tap. At Griffin Station, Groff and Schuster unwittingly discover how to charge the MPD when Schuster killed a rat near the device. Its death inexplicably began charging the device by filling its tank. They reported their findings to Ultimus Richthofen, who began sending soldiers and scientists to be sacrificed to charge the MPD. By the end of 1942, Maxis expressed concerns over Element 115's impact on Ultimus Richthofen's behavior. Although no longer trusting him, he left his daughter Samantha in Ultimus Richthofen's care, as Maxis himself was transferred to the Kino facility with his assistant Sophia to focus on creating Germany's undead army. In 1943, Nikolai Belinsky, or Ultimus Nikolai in this case, was captured during the Battle of Stalingrad and became a test subject for Group 935. In that same year, Ultimus Takaya Masaki was captured by Group 935 on the orders of the Emperor. In 1944, Pablo Marinas, a Mexican spy, was captured by Group 935 at Der Eisendrache. In his cell, Pablo wrote of visions of a great war. He described a great battle against strange demon-like creatures who were trying to devour the earth. In his visions, he saw 4 knights protecting him from certain death. He made a note that the knights wore tunics similar to the statues in Der Eisendrache. In 1945, OSS operative Peter McCain infiltrated Group 935. In July of 1945, Richthofen traveled to the Siberian facility to do further research on live specimens. As her temporary guardian, he took Samantha with him. Ultimus Richthofen also brought the Vril device. Several days after his arrival, a reporter was arrested near the facility. When Richthofen interrogated him, the reporter revealed he was working for Mr. Rapt, who was looking for several artifacts, among them the Vril vessel. After Richthofen refused to give him the vessel, he ordered the guards to kill the reporter. In August of 1945, Group 935 began to transfer 3 test subjects for experimentation: Ultimus Nikolai, Pablo Marinas, and Ultimus Takaya. Ultimus Richthofen began experimenting on them a few days after their arrival. Ultimus Richthofen also started looking for a way to create an elemental shard in order to build the Agarthan device. Suspecting Group 935 would lose control of their experiments, Peter's handler, Cornelius Purnell, sent a Marine recon team led by Tank Dempsey to extract Peter McCain, whose cover had been blown. In September of 1945, during an operation with Harvey Yenna, another American spy, Ultimus Richthofen extracted Pablo Marinas' spleen. He noted that the barrier to unlock the human mind was not located in the spleen. Believing Marinas dead, they dumped him into the river. However, Pablo had survived and would later awaken in a pocket dimension at the bottom of the river before swimming back to the Siberian facility, where he would remain for the next 20 years. Several days later, the recon team arrived at the asylum facility where an outbreak occurred. Ultimus Dempsey was captured and sent to Ultimus Richthofen in Siberia to replace Pablo Marinas. Ultimus Richthofen continued experimenting on Dempsey, Nikolai, and Takaya, and documented the personality traits of his test subjects. Dempsey's intellect seemed low, but his will was strong. Takaya was still staring at the floor, muttering what sounds like some kind of proverb over and over again, and Nikolai had recently begun responding to stimuli, but only after injections of a new serum made primarily from vodka. Ultimus Richthofen noted that their minds had been almost entirely broken, with no memory remaining of who they once were. While at the Siberian facility, Ultimus Richthofen also began experimenting on Samantha. As he continued looking for a way to build the Agarthan device, Ultimus Richthofen managed to siphon a piece of the souls of his 3 test subjects into a processed rock of element 115 using the Vril vessel. He used his own for the 4th soul required, and as the souls were injected into the rock, it transformed and created a shard of glass. Unbeknownst to Ultimus Richthofen, by forging their souls to element 115, he bound his soul, and the ones from Nikolai, Takaya, and Tank, to the Aether across all dimensions. All their different forms and versions were now connected to the Aether throughout time and space. After learning from Harvey Yenna that Maxis didn't mass-produce the Wunderwaffe DG2 as promised, Ultimus Richthofen started plotting to destroy Maxis and his daughter. He vowed he would no longer to continue work on Maxis's undead army. With the war over, Maxis returned to Doris in October of 1945 and ordered Ultimus Richthofen to do likewise so they might continue their work on the matter transference device. Several days later, Richthofen would arrive at Doris with his test subjects and Samantha. On October 12th, Graf would contact Ultimus Richthofen to inform him the MPD had been powered and was awaiting the conduit. On October 13th of 1945, during a series of teleportation test trials, Maxis used Samantha's dog Fluffy as a test subject. Fluffy, now changed, was teleported back into the chamber. When Samantha saw Fluffy, she ran inside the teleporter. Maxis chased after her, and Ultimus Richthofen sealed them both in the test chamber before teleporting them away. While Maxis was teleported to the Crazy Place, where he learned the power to merge with electricity, Samantha was teleported to Griffin Station. She ran inside the MPD, where she became corrupted by the Dark Aether. When he learned about this incident, Richthofen ordered Graf to teleport Maxis to the moon to coax Samantha out of the device. Maxis approached the MPD and persuaded her to come out. Once she did, Maxis gave her the instruction to kill them all before killing himself and merging with the technology of Griffin Station. Samantha then entered the MPD and unleashed the undead upon the base, killing anyone involved with the organization. The next day, an outbreak occurred at the Doris facility. H. Porter activated the alarm before killing himself. Ultimus Richthofen returned to the facility where he awoke Dempsey, Takio, and Nikolai. With no recollection of who they were or who Richthofen was, they agreed to help him. Several days later, Ultimus traveled to the Rising Sun facility where an outbreak occurred. In the facility, Ultimus discovered the corpse of Peter McCain, who died during a parachute incident after being ordered by Cornelius Purnell to rendezvous at the facility. Ultimus Richthofen also recovered his diary, which contained his research notes concerning Element 115, and began to formulate a plan to defeat Samantha. A week later, Ultimus returned to Doris, where Ultimus Richthofen planned to use the teleporter to return to the moon and confront Samantha. However, the Wunderwaffe DG2 overloaded the teleporter and sent Ultimus to the Kino facility in 1963, causing Ultimus Richthofen to drop his diary, which was later discovered by the Soviet Union. This marked the first time Ultimus traveled across space and time and resulted in temporal rifts occurring across dimension. In light of these developments, Monty felt obligated to step in and began to make changes in the background across time. He helped Group 935 invent perk machines. He also then would add chalk drawings to the walls. When Ultimus arrived at the Kino facility on October 28th of 1963, they located a lunar lander and flew to the Ascension facility. In the weeks prior to Ultimus's arrival at the Ascension facility, a Russian scientist from the Ascension group named Yuri Zaviosky became corrupted by Samantha's voice after reading Ultimus Richthofen's diary. Yuri tricked his colleague, Dr. Anton Gersh, into activating a Gersh device. The rift created allowed Samantha to travel through. It also absorbed Gersh, destroying his body and trapping him inside the Casimir mechanism. Yuri was also absorbed and transported to the Pentagon. When Ultimus arrived at the Ascension facility on November 6th of 1963, they found the outbreak had occurred and Gersh begged them to free him from the Casimir mechanism. At the same time, in the Pentagon, John F. Kennedy, Robert McNamara, Fidel Castro, and Richard Nixon were discussing a future alliance between the United States and Cuba to fight Samantha, when an outbreak occurred inside the building. Yuri, who was responsible for a prior outbreak in the Pentagon, was sent by Samantha to thwart their survival. After Ultimus freed Gersh from the Casimir mechanism, he sent them to their next destination before beginning his travels across space and time. With the departure of Ultimus from the Cosmodrome, both outbreaks were contained and Yuri was arrested. Ultimus arrived in a locked room at the Siberian facility on March 17, 2011, where George A. Romero, who had stumbled upon Group 935's research, was making a movie with Sarah Michelle Gellar, Robert Englund, Danny Trejo, and Michael Rooker. An outbreak soon occurred, and George Romero was turned into a zombie. The actors recovered the Vril device for Ultimus, who were then teleported to their next destination. The fate of the cast and crew remained unknown, but 6 weeks later, Romero's assistant, Sally, was teleported to Shangri-La and trapped inside a time loop while looking through Romero's research about Group 935. As they continued their journey, Ultimus arrived at Shangri-La on April 25, 1956. With the help of two explorers trapped inside the time loop, Brock and Gary, Ultimus acquired the Focusing Stone. Now in possession of the Vril device and Focusing Stone, Ultimus Richthofen was ready to return to the moon. Ultimus Dempsey, however, fired the 3179 JGB-215 while inside the teleporter. This caused Ultimus to travel to the Pentagon before the November 6th outbreak had occurred. Meanwhile, Yuri was sent to Samantha to release the zombies kept in the Pentagon before being sent to November 6th. Once in the Pentagon, Ultimus traveled to Groom Lake, Nevada, where they used the teleporter to reach the moon. Once inside Griffin Station on October 13, 2025, Ultimus reactivated the MPD, which revealed Samantha as she was when she entered the device back in 1945. Ultimus Richthofen then used a terminal to power up the Vril device and merged it with the Focusing Stone. However, he encountered Maxis inside the terminal, who tried to stop him. Ultimus Richthofen was able to complete his grand scheme and switched his soul with that of Samantha's, gaining full control of the Aether while Samantha was trapped inside Richthofen's body. Dempsey, Nikolai, and Takeo then decided to help the disembodied AI Maxis stop Richthofen. They launched 3 missiles at the Earth in order to sever the link between Earth and the Aether. However, the calculations were made in haste, causing catastrophic destruction to the Earth. Meanwhile, in 2035, Victis, another group, was able to activate all 3 polarization devices in Maxis' favor. Maxis, now corrupted by the Dark Aether, returned to the moon in 2025 and plucked Samantha from Richthofen's body to join him in Agartha before destroying the Earth and all its inhabitants. As a last bit of revenge, Maxis trapped Ultimus Richtofen's soul in a zombie, creating undead Richthofen, leaving his body in a catatonic state. Ultimus Dempsey, Takeo, Nikolai, and Richthofen's catatonic body were then accidentally teleported back to Groom Lake on August 3, 1963, where they were captured by Nicholas Purnell and kept in Hangar 4 to be experimented on. Several months later, on October 13th, undead Richthofen stepped out of a portal from the empty Earth and re-merged his soul with Ultimus Richthofen's body, waking him from his coma. Sometime later, Primis teleported inside Hangar 4, where they freed and met their Ultimus selves. Nikolai, now assuming the role of leader of the group, revealed to Ultimus there will be a war to be fought, a great war, before teleporting away from the hangar. The missile launched by the Ultimus crew in 2025 left the Earth as a post-apocalyptic crumbling wasteland littered with undead hordes as civilization collapsed. As survivors began to band together to form small human communities and shelters to protect themselves from the now global undead threat, Maxis realized the failure of his original plans due to hasty calculations and began contacting survivors to help him with his Plan B. Activate global polarization devices and open a gateway to Agartha, where he would overpower Richthofen and use its energy to heal the Earth. Unbeknownst to his followers, Maxis secretly planned to commandeer the Aether's energy for his own use to open the gateway to Agartha and reunite with Samantha, which would ultimately destroy the Earth and its people. Ultimus Richthofen, unsatisfied with his limited power over the undead, planned to activate these polarization devices as well, which would grant him further manipulation of both zombies and humans and mend the rift, a direct gateway to Agartha, which would eternally damn the souls of Samantha Maxis in the process. Limited to communication with only those capable of hearing the voices of the Aether, Ultimus Richthofen began his own quest for unlimited power. Over the years, Maxis followers started constructing the first polarization device near the Hanford site in Transit, Washington State. However, his followers began to doubt his goals and believed him to be evil, and proceeded to destroy the devices. Meanwhile, the Flesh, a society of survivors who ate the undead, was formed. As its members ate the flesh of the undead, they began to hear Ultimus Richthofen, who tried to persuade them to construct the polarization devices. Eventually, a battle broke out between Maxis' followers and the Flesh, with only a few left to escape as an undead horde descended upon them. Several years later, in 2035, Marlton Johnson, the sole survivor of the nuclear incident at Camp Edward and the missile strike, met with Abigail Misty Briarton in a diner near Transit, where they encountered two more survivors, Russ Mann, a Broken Arrow operative, and Samuel J. Stuhlinger, one of the remaining members of the Flesh, who used a stolen bus for transport. These four would become known as Victis. At the Hanford site, Victis was contacted by Maxis, who revealed the town contains a polarization device required for his plans. At the same time, Richthofen contacted Samuel, instructing him to foil Maxis' plans by activating the tower in his favor, beginning a race for power between Maxis and Richthofen. Victis ultimately activated the tower for Maxis, consuming the essence of the entity called the Avogadro. Victis was then teleported by Ultimus Richthofen to a skyscraper in the crumbled city of Shanghai, Province 22, China. In an attempt to gain control of the tower located there, Maxis also contacted Victis, hoping to convince them to give him control of the tower. Richthofen tried to blackmail Samuel into cooperating by threatening to reveal to his allies that he had consumed undead meat. Every time the group failed to carry out the objective and was killed by the zombie horde, Richthofen would use his power to bring them back with no memory of their previous failures or deaths. Victis ultimately activated the second polarization device in Maxis' favor. Victis managed to escape the building they were trapped in and started to wander the world to reach the rift, hoping to find answers about the unseen forces commanding them. They traveled through the remains of Europe, crossed the Sahara Desert, and by December 31st, 2035, found a western town buried underground near the rift in southern Angola. The town was transported from the 1800s to underneath the mining facility by a temporal rift triggered by the fracturing of the earth 10 years earlier. In one of the cells, Victis found Arthur, who had been transported to the town from 1318 by a previous temporal rift. Maxis once again contacted the survivors, imploring them to activate the last spire in his favor. Meanwhile, Samuel was tasked with the same objective by Richthofen, as it was also the last tower he needed to mend the rift and gain unlimited power. The group decided to follow Maxis' plan and polarize the last tower in his favor. Maxis then gained control of the Aether and opened a gateway to Agartha. He removed Samantha's soul from Richthofen's body back in 2025, and as a last revenge against his former assistant, Maxis trapped Richthofen's soul inside a zombie whose eyes become blue. Becoming undead Richthofen, he traveled to the house, reunited with his daughter Samantha, but opening the portal to Agartha results in the destruction of Earth and its inhabitants. Samantha, after witnessing her father's corruption by the Dark Aether, reached out through a temporal rift to the Maxis of Dimension 63 for help. Following Maxis' victory, the Victis crew was contacted by Primis Richthofen and offered an escape portal from the soon-to-be destroyed Earth. Primis Richthofen has discovered his connection with Samuel Stuhlinger shortly after the event of Origins in Dimension 63 and had decided to use Victis to acquire the Chronorium, a book needed for his plan to find the summoning key. Primis Richthofen also instructed the undead Richthofen, Ultimus, to pursue Victis and recover their blood vials. The escape portal led Victis to an abandoned Broken Arrow facility which Russman had previously worked at. There, they recovered a fragment of the elemental shard before providing blood samples which transported them to empty Earth, still being chased by undead Richthofen. Escaping the zombie horde led by undead Richthofen, they arrived at Zero Base, a facility created by some version of Maxis in the empty Earth. While some of Victis felt that they were finally safe in Zero Base, Primis Richthofen informed Stuhlinger that the empty Earth was a tangential world which would soon collapse due to their intrusion. Their only way out would be to recover the chronorium stored within the base. After taking possession of the chronorium, they departed through another rift, while undead Richthofen collected the blood samples they had left behind. Victis arrived inside Richthofen's lab beneath Alcatraz in Dimension 63, where they finally met Primis Richthofen. Upon reading the chronorium, Richthofen discovered numerous timelines documenting their fates and learned about the blood vials. He would later write on the page, "I know what I must do, ER 4741. Then, he left his lab, collected Victis's blood samples from undead Richthofen in the empty Earth, retrieved blood samples of Sal DeLuca and Finn O'Leary, and then gave the prisoner's blood samples to his younger self in 1914. Primis Richthofen then returned to the lab, where he offered to put Victis on ice inside suspension devices where they would be kept safe until the final world arrives, which Victis accepted. Shortly after being placed in stasis, the Primis crew from the future teleported to the lab, and Primis Richthofen gave the later version of himself the Victis blood samples. In Dimension 63 in 1300, Pablo Marinus, who had been transported back in time from the pocket dimension by Victis, began documenting the Great War, including everything he had learned about the Keepers, the Apothecans, and Element 115. Regarding Element 115's power, he noted that a site in northern France contained massive deposits of the element. In northern France, a tomb was constructed to honor the fallen soldiers of the Great War. Within it, statues of Primis were constructed to symbolize the hope that if one day a great evil falls upon mankind, they may return. Several centuries later, Dr. Ludwig Maxis and Dr. Edward Richthofen, specifically Primis Richthofen, joined Group 935. In 1914, Primis Richthofen was visited by an older version of himself, who handed him 2 blood vials and explained that he would need this blood, and when the time came, they would protect him. The older version of Primis Richthofen then left through a rift. In 1916, Group 935 discovered the journal of Sir Pablo Marinus. Using information gathered from the journal, Group 935 began work at a dig site in northern France, where they discovered a series of underground tombs. They struggled to gain access of the tomb's main chamber until the entrance unexpectedly opened when soldiers listened to a record of La Source Noire. The camp's exposure to Element 115 began soon after. In 1917, Group 935 experimented with Element 115, dubbed Divinium by Maxis, and successfully created localized energy fields which appeared to function as portals. Maxis noted that the objects could pass through them and speculated the rifts may have opened gateways across space and time. After witnessing the corruption of her father by Dark Aether in the house, Samantha reached out to this Dimension 63 version of Maxis through the rifts opened by Group 935. She begged for his help and revealed she was his daughter. Group 935 would continue experimenting with Element 115 and the rifts. One day, an ancient box arrived through one of the portals. The box had the power to manifest weapons from different eras. Maxis feared Element 115 was disrupting the space-time continuum. Following the installation of Element 115-powered generators, reports surfaced of ancient figures emerging from the dig site, corresponding with the mysterious deaths of several Group 935 soldiers. Using Element 115, Group 935 later constructed 4 giant robots, including 3, Freya, Odin, and Thor. Primis Richthofen noted that despite Group 935's progress at the dig site, he was still troubled by Maxis's growing obsession with Sir Pablo Marinus' diary. Meanwhile, Primis, Tank Dempsey, Nikolai Belinsky, and Takayama Masaki were dispatched by their respective governments to gather intel and investigate on Group 935's weapon technology and capabilities. By 1918, Maxis had become obsessed with Samantha, who spoke to him constantly. He believed her to be the key to everything and eventually swore to no longer serve Group 935's mission. On June 4th of 1918, Element 115 awakened the undead knights from the Great War, who quickly consumed the camp. Maxis was rendered catatonic by the element, but Primis Richthofen was able to remove his brain before he turned. Primis, Dempsey, Nikolai, and Takiao united with Primis Richthofen on the battlefield, put Maxis's brain in a drone, and helped free Samantha from her imprisonment in Agartha. Maxis's brain would then follow her to Agartha. When Maxis's brain arrived at the house in Agartha, Dr. Monty decided to step in and, despite the absence of his soul, recreated a physical manifestation of Maxis's Dimension 63 form. Monty then erased the original timeline's dark ether corrupted Maxis from existence. After cleansing the remaining corruption from Samantha, Monty united her with the Dimension 63 incarnation of her father and Fluffy. At this point, Monty revealed to Maxis his plan to resolve the paradox wrought by a multiverse and create a new reality, one free of the Apothecans, but it would only work if they enlisted the aid of souls who had lived through and survived the fracturing. Samantha sent Primis to the Ultimus Dimension in 1943, where they formulated a plan to stop Ultimus Richthofen and prevent the events that were about to unfold. Primis Richthofen alone was teleported to the house in Agartha and reunited with Maxis. Maxis explained to Richthofen the plan to secure the Chronorium and locate the summoning key, and warned him that the test subjects must never be allowed to be awakened. While inside the house, Primis Richthofen discovered his connection with Samuel Stuhlinger and decided to use Victis to acquire the Chronorium. Primis Richthofen traveled back to 1940 in Dimension 63, where he contacted members of the Illuminati and enlisted their help to build a laboratory facility beneath Alcatraz. Several days later, he met with Stanley Ferguson and convinced him to assist with the Illuminati's construction of the Alcatraz laboratory. Having overseen the construction of a laboratory beneath Alcatraz, Richthofen returned to the house in Agartha, where he began to communicate with Stuhlinger. Together, they persuaded Victis to travel to a variety of locations in order to recover the Chronorium. When Primis Richthofen returned to the library in 1941, he transported Victis to the lab to meet them. Upon reading the Chronorium, Primis Richthofen discovered numerous timelines documenting their fates and learning about the blood vials. Shortly after putting Victis in stasis, the rest of the Primis team arrived at the lab from the Prototon fracture, and Primis Richthofen gave them Victis's blood samples. Following their departure, Primis Richthofen learned the location of the summoning key and traveled to Morgue City. There, he learned that the reporter had the summoning key and confronted him. The reporter, who had been warned by Monty's letter not to give the key to anyone, ordered Richthofen to stay away before attacking him. Primis Richthofen killed the reporter in self-defense, but was unable to retrieve the artifact as the crate containing the key had been sealed with ancient magic. In Morgue City, 4 individuals with checkered pasts, Floyd Campbell, Jessica Rose, Nero Blackstone, and Jackie Vincent, were influenced by the Shadowman to kill someone they knew. They were then drugged, and upon awakening, were manipulated into conducting a ritual, thinking it would absolve them of their sins. Instead, it allowed the Apothecans into Dimension 63. After realizing their mistake, the 4 worked with the Keepers to defeat the Shadowman and trapped him inside the summoning key. Primis Richthofen would return to Morgue City and steal the summoning key, with the Shadowman trapped inside it, from the 4 before leaving the dimension. Primis Richthofen then traveled to Dimension 2210, where he secured the soul of a young, innocent Richthofen. Returning to the house, Monty was able to give the innocent soul a physical form named Eddie. He also took custody of the summoning key, though the Shadowman ominously promised, "I'll be seeing you," foreshadowing his planned escape. Primis Richthofen then returned to the Ultimus Dimension, where he stepped out of a teleporter moments after Ultimus Richthofen had teleported Maxis and Samantha away and killed his Ultimus self, triggering fractures across space and time. The Shadowman was the only Apothecan to survive this banishment to the Dark Aether, and traveled across the multiverse to find a way for the Apothecans to reach Agartha. Posing as Mr. Rapt, the Shadowman hired the same reporter across different dimensions to receive the summoning key, as well as the components for the Agarthan device. After learning the fate of Sal DeLuca, Billy Handsome, Weasel, and Finn O'Leary in Dimension 63, the Shadowman contacted the Warden of Alcatraz during the 1930s and corrupted him. In 1932, Sal, Billy, Al, and Finn were convicted and sent to Alcatraz. The next year, on April 1st, Arlington convinced the other three they could build a plane and escape the island by the end of the year. However, the others realized the plane would never be completed. Embittered, they plotted to get revenge on Arlington. In January of 1930, on December 31st, 1933, DeLuca, O'Leary, and Finn lured Arlington onto the roof and killed him. The Shadowman revealed to the Warden that he would transform the island with the souls of the four mobsters and created a trap to ensnare Primis Richthofen inside a pocket dimension. In January of 1934, just a few days before they were executed, Primis Richthofen stepped through a portal and secured the blood samples of DeLuca and O'Leary. On January 19, 1934, Salvatore DeLuca, Billy Handsome, and Michael O'Leary were executed by electric chair for the murder of Arlington. After their execution, the Warden killed himself with the electric chair before disappearing from Dimension 63. In late 1943, the reporter recovered the summoning key in the South Pacific, the Seal of Duality, as well as the Rock of Element 115 in Russia, and then interviewed Stanley Ferguson, a retired guard who worked at the Alcatraz prison between 1933 and 1941. Ferguson gave the reporter a detailed account of the death of four mobsters and their plan to escape the Rock. After learning their fate, the Shadowman went into the past and contacted the Warden of Alcatraz in the 30s. On December 31st, 1943, the reporter arrived in Morgue City as requested by the Shadowman to track down Floyd Campbell, Jessica Rose, Nero Blackstone, and Jackie Vincent. Over the next few months, the reporter gathered enough information and sent a telegram providing their details. The Shadowman then influenced them to kill someone they knew. Aware of the Shadowman's actions, Monty wrote to the reporter, warning him not to give the summoning key to anyone. Richthofen then arrived in Morgue City, killed the reporter, didn't obtain the summoning key, and had to come back and steal it off of Floyd, Jessica, Nero, and Jackie. In the Ultimus dimension, Primis, Dempsey, Nikolai, and Takeo were teleported in by Samantha and arrived at the Doris facility moments after Ultimus Richthofen teleported Maxis and Samantha away. They ordered Ultimus Richthofen to awaken the test subjects. Ultimus, Dempsey, Nikolai, and Takeo, who had been kept in stasis prior to the outbreak at Doris in the original timeline. At this point, the teleporter activated, and Primis Richthofen, now in possession of the summoning key, emerged, killing Ultimus Richthofen, collecting his soul within the summoning key, and triggering fractures across space and time. Now, inside the Deceptio fracture, Primis lit up a beacon within the facility, enabling Maxis to know where and when they were. Using a giant robot at Doris, Primis pursued a Group 935 truck carrying a cryostasis pod containing Ultimus Dempsey. The robot, however, was shot down by the soldiers, forcing Primis to continue on foot. They reached a gondola station which took them to Eagle's Nest. However, they were too late to stop Ultimus Dempsey from being launched on a rocket towards Griffin Station. As they carried on with their mission, Primis Richthofen posed as his Ultimus self to fool Dr. Groff, though the latter gradually became suspicious of Richthofen's abnormal behavior. Eventually, Primis redirected the rocket containing Ultimus Dempsey's pod to the castle courtyard. In retaliation, Groff activated a failsafe, preventing them from tampering with the pod. Primis used the Vril device from the cryopod to conjure up the spirit of a keeper. The keeper then teleported the MPD from Griffin Station to the castle, but became corrupted by the Dark Aether in the process, forcing Primis to defeat it. Primis then used the summoning key to activate the MPD and launched dozens of V2 rockets towards the moon, destroying it along with all Group 935 members within Griffin Station. As they approached Ultimate Dempsey's pod, Richthofen revealed his plan to eliminate their Ultimus counterparts and preserve their souls in the summoning key. Dempsey, though initially resentful of the idea, agreed to the plan and took it upon himself to disable the pod's life support, ending the life of Ultimus Dempsey. As he died, Primis Richthofen used the summoning key to capture and preserve his soul. With the death of Ultimus Dempsey, their goal at Griffin Station was complete. Primis then teleported to the Prototoned fracture, where they were taken hostage on board a Japanese ship in the Pacific. While a Japanese officer was interrogating them about the summoning key, a massive wave struck the ship, sending everyone off their balance. A brief fight ensued, and the officer dropped the artifact. Primis then jumped overboard as the ship exploded and swam to a nearby island, where they found a Division 9 facility. Primis discovered deep inside this facility a giant thrasher locked within a cell, which was revealed to be Ultimus Takiao, who was being experimented on. Ultimus Takiao revealed to Primis Takiao that it was the Emperor himself who ordered Division 9 to torture and experiment on him. Primis Takiao offered his Ultimus self a chance to right the wrongs of the universe, which he accepted. Ultimus Takiao committed seppuku, with Primis Takiao acting as his Kashakunin. With his death, Primis Richthofen was able to secure the soul of Ultimus Takiao inside the summoning key. Primis then teleported to Richthofen's laboratory beneath Alcatraz, where they met an earlier version of Primis Richthofen before he acquired the summoning key. The earlier Primis Richthofen gave them the blood of Victis, and Primis stepped through the portal to their next destination. Primis accidentally teleported over the city of Stalingrad in the Angonia fracture. During the freefall, they grabbed onto the corpse of Peter McCain, who had also gone through a portal, and activated his parachute to land safely. They discovered an ongoing battle between dragons and Russian giant robots, with Ultimus Nikolai as the sole survivor fighting zombies inside a Manticore mech suit. Upon noticing Primis, Ultimus Nikolai attempted to kill them, but was thrown into a building by a dragon before he could succeed. He later questioned who they were and if they could help him. Eventually, Primis reached Sophia, an AI made from the brain of Maxis's assistant, Sophia, who had been attacked by a zombie during their stay at the Kino facility. She asked them to perform several tasks before a master password could be typed in, prompting Primis to complete the Ascension protocol. As they continued to follow Sophia's instructions, they found Gersh, who recognized them, yet knew they were not the same versions who had freed him. Primis tricked Gersh into entering the systems of Sophia to extract information from him, leading to his destruction. With the Ascension protocol completed, Sophia flew away through space and times in hope of finding Maxis. During their mission at Stalingrad, Monty contacted Primis, stating he had seen their misdeeds and asked them to fix the universe as they were partially responsible for its fracture. Primis then reached Ultimus Nikolai, who made a temporary truce with them to kill the dragon. However, upon the dragon's death, Primis asked Ultimus Nikolai to surrender. Ultimus Nikolai refused, and a brief fight broke out between them. Ultimately, Primis defeated Ultimus Nikolai, who was then approached by his Primis self. As he approached, Ultimus Nikolai asked if he would kill him now. Primis Nikolai apologized, stating he wished there was another way, and remarked he was suffering the same pain. He explained that Ultimus Nikolai turned to alcohol to hide the agonizing memories of his wife's death during an air raid. In a fit of rage, Ultimus Nikolai fired upon his Primis self. However, the shot hit Primis Nikolai on his armored plate, causing no damage, and in retaliation, Primis Nikolai killed Ultimus Nikolai, allowing Richthofen to secure his soul. With all the souls collected, Richthofen sent them to a house in Agartha, where Monty turned them into children. When the souls arrived in the house, Maxis told Samantha and Eddie to put their toys away before coming down to the basement. At some point, Maxis became overwhelmed by the voice of the Shadowman begging for his help from within the summoning key. When Maxis took the artifact, he released the Shadowman and became trapped inside the summoning key himself. Once outside the house, the Shadowman opened a gateway for the Apothicons, fracturing and corrupting Agartha and revealing the Apothicon sun. Primis fought the Apothicons and the Shadowman. During the battle, Sophia arrived in Agartha. Using the summoning key and the Chronorium, Primis defeated the Shadowman with the help of Sophia. Maxis, still inside the summoning key, and Sophia then plunged into the Apothicon sun, destroying the Apothicons and purging Element 115 from the final universe. After the battle, Monty realized Primis drank the blood from their blood vials, blood coming from realities that had already been closed off. This prevented Primis from fading out of existence and resulted in a paradox. As Monty was looking for a way to get rid of Primis Richthofen suggested he send them somewhere none of their other selves had ever been to, and as a result, Primis was sent back to 1294, where they saved Pablo Marinus during the Great War between humanity and the Apothicans, ultimately creating a loop in time. When Pablo Marinus arrived in northern France in 1294, having been transported from the pocket dimension in Siberia, he fought alongside the Wolf King. He was saved from a Marquis by Primis, and after Primis had been sent to the Great War by Monty. At this point, Primis Richthofen realized that Monty was lying about securing a better tomorrow. He realized that going to the Great War wouldn't break the cycle, as it was the end of their loop. Primis Richthofen finally understood that Monty wasn't inherently evil. He was just trying to survive by saving the multiverse the only way he knew how. By fulfilling the prophecy of breaking the cycle, Primis Richthofen and Dr. Monty had forged an endless loop. With the help of Pablo Marinus, Primis Richthofen started a plan to break the cycle. As Pablo Marinus was defending him from the zombies, Primis Richthofen powered up a teleportation device to travel to the Alcatraz pocket dimension. Before he left, Pablo gave him the elemental gem from the Fire Staff. This version of Richthofen would become known as Post-Great War Richthofen. Upon arriving from the Proteatone Fracture, another iteration of Primis arrived at the Alcatraz pocket dimension, farther from their destination than they intended, and made their way to a laboratory on the west side of the island. In the laboratory, they found the earlier version of Primis Richthofen before his journey to Morgue City, reading the chronorium as he waited for them to arrive. The lone Richthofen stated they were late before giving them blood vials. He then strongly advised Primis Richthofen read the chronorium again before he left via his own portal. Upon reading it, Primis Richthofen realized the pages had changed. Primis traveled through the cell blocks while fending off zombies to escape through another rift. However, this was prevented by the Warden, who destroyed the rift before Primis could leave. Primis Richthofen then realized they were now trapped inside the Alcatraz pocket dimension, as the Shadowman had intended. While exploring Alcatraz, Primis Richthofen began hearing Samuel J. Stuhlinger in his head, and realized the lighthouse must have triggered a chain reaction in the ether. Primis also discovered the Warden's inner sanctum, where they found the Warden's body attached to an electric chair. As they were retrieving the chronorium, Arlington, now in the form of a Steagle, stole the book. After recovering it, Primis placed it on the Warden's body. Using the chronorium, Primis helped several spirits trapped inside the dimension before placing the summoning key inside the Warden's body to be used as a conduit to his soul. This resulted in the partial destruction of the lighthouse, which fired a red beam of light towards the sky and prompted the Warden to attack Primis, stating they now belonged to him, before knocking them out and locking them in a cell. The Warden explained to Primis they would be trapped in the pocket dimension forever, suffering with their blood extracted by his machine, as it was the key to keep the gateway open and also freed the Shadowman and the Apothicans. However, after the Warden left, Arlington arrived and helped Primis escape their cells. As they ran back to the lab, they were stopped by the Warden, who turned into a giant version of himself. He was, however, restrained by the spirits of Sal DeLuca, Billy Handsome, and Finn O'Leary, who launched him into the sky. Inside the lab, another cryopod was revealed, and Primis started its thawing sequence. Primis then confronted the Warden in front of the dark mechanism next to the Model Industries to prevent him from acquiring the last piece of the mechanism. During the fight, Primis Richthofen decided to step inside the dark mechanism and gave his blood. In the meantime, the cryopod opened, revealing post-Great War Richthofen, wearing chainmail and holding the elemental gem. He joined the fight, used the gem to kill the Warden and the zombies, freeing their spirits from the pocket dimension. Post-Great War Richthofen revealed to Primis Nikolai that the future had changed and handed him the chronorium, advising him to read it. He explained to Nikolai that he must keep his soul in order to defeat Monty, to which Primis Nikolai replied, "Who?" Several portals appeared, and post-Great War Richthofen moved to the dark mechanism, where he revealed to Primis Richthofen that the cycle was broken and their insurance policies, the blood vials, were no longer needed. He grabbed the summoning key and joined Primis, who smashed their blood vials before stepping through the portals, leaving Richthofen to die in the pocket dimension as it collapsed. After leaving Alcatraz, Primis Nikolai, now assuming the role of leader, Dempsey, Takiao, and post-Great War Richtofen teleported to Hangar 4 at Groom Lake in 1963, where they met and freed their Ultimus selves. Primis Nikolai revealed to them that there would be a war to be fought, a great war, before teleporting away from the hangar. Primis and Ultimus then arrived at Camp Edward, Nevada, on October 13, 2025. They reactivated the facility and its AI, Rushmore. The elemental shard to proceed was locked inside the American Pyramid device, and Rushmore tested them before granting them access to it. During their exploration, they found Peter McCain trapped inside an android. With the help of Rushmore, who deemed Peter someone very important to humanity's future, Primis and Ultimus transferred him to an elemental orb, which then flew away from Camp Edward. When they opened the pyramid, they released Cornelius Purnell, who had been transformed by the shard into the monstrous entity Avogadro. With the release of Avogadro, a nuke was detonated, but was ineffective. They managed to contain Avogadro inside the APD long enough for Rushmore to transfer it to the Hanford site. After they retrieved the shard, Maxis contacted them saying it was too late. Maxis teleported Samantha and Eddie away from the house before being devoured by Monty. When Samantha arrived at Camp Edward, she unleashed her fury, causing tremendous damage to Camp Edward before stating to Eddie that they would fight the Great War, kill Monty, and burn the house to the ground. After their journey to Camp Edward, Primis and Ultimus, accompanied with Samantha and Eddie, settled down in a forest. They proceeded to celebrate their future victory around a campfire, drinking and eating. Primis Nikolai explained to them the Great War, the Apothecans, the Keepers, the Dark Aether, the Shadowman, and Monty. They're all just legend and tales from the Chronorium. He revealed that the Shadowman and Monty had become corrupted by the Dark Aether, one from his own ambition, and the other desperately trying to save his friend. He revealed the greatest war was the war they were fighting against themselves. As they kept celebrating, Primis Nikolai told them to think about what they desired, where they would like to go. Unbeknownst to them, the members of Primis and Ultimus had their drinks poisoned by Primis Nikolai. All of them, save for Nikolai, Ultimus Richtofen, Samantha, and Eddie, died to help resolve the paradox. With Primis Richtofen's death, Ultimus Richtofen reverted to undead Richtofen. Undead Richtofen then contacted Victis, who exited their cryogenic pods and stepped through a portal before the Alcatraz pocket dimension collapsed. Victis arrived at the abandoned Group 935 Siberian facility of a different pocket dimension and was instructed by Undead Richtofen to build an Agarthan device. In the facility, they encounter Pablo Marinus, who had survived the operation performed by Ultimus Richtofen in 1945 and had been inside the facility, living as a hermit for 20 years. Pablo Marinus told Victis he could build the Agarthan device for them. Victis recovered the Vril vessel inside the facility, as well as the blood of an apothecon inside the stranded Ascension Group ship. They also retrieved the elemental shards sent by Primis Nikolai and gave them to Pablo Marinus. When the Agarthan device was completed, the presence of the apothecon blood caused the species of apothecons and keepers to reunite as one, resolving the duality that existed between the species. As Victis activated the Agarthan device, it started to evolve, affecting all the Element 115 in the area. Primis Nikolai tasked Victis to stay close to the device and protect it until it reached its final state. Once charged, Victis returned the Agarthan device to Pablo Marinus, who used it to create a portal in order to go to the Great War and help Primis Richtofen in breaking the cycle. Victis then retrieved the device and sent it to Primis Nikolai. Using the Agarthan device, Primis Nikolai destroyed the summoning key to open the way through before killing Undead Richtofen. With the destruction of the summoning key, reality collapsed, and the entirety of creation started to fade away, including Victis, the zombies, the apothecons, Element 115, and even Monty himself. Everything that spewed forth from the ether was banished to where they belonged, the Dark Aether. Primis Nikolai then asked Samantha to kill him. With the death of Primis and Ultimus, the paradox was resolved. As the multiverse faded away, Samantha and Eddie walked towards the light and into a new universe, towards a better tomorrow.